Ohio State and Washington both with 15 Rose Bowl appearances, but this is the first time the Buckeyes and the Huskies have gotten together. Got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts, talking Ohio State football. Steve, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, so this is the granddaddy of them all, even in the playoff era. I was disheartened to hear a number of Ohio State fans on social media after the college football playoff selections were announced, to hear that they weren't too thrilled about the Rose Bowl. How you can't be thrilled about the Rose Bowl. I understand the disappointment because you want to win the ultimate ring. And I just think this is an unfortunate byproduct of what the system now is.
Yeah, no question about it, Mark. We had this last year. Ohio State played the Pac-12 champion last year in the Cotton Bowl, and it was USC. I think had that game been USC in the Rose Bowl, I think maybe people would have been more excited about that, but it was kind of treated as kind of a blasé thing. Ohio State won the game 24-7, but neither team played well. A ton of mistakes on both sides of the ball, and Ohio State won the game 24-7. It was their first win over USC, I want to say, since 1973, something along those lines, or January 1 of 74, perhaps. And they had lost to them, I want to say, 7 times, perhaps, in the interim since 1974. And this was USC, a team that rubbed Ohio State's nose in it as recently as 2008. There was a game at the Coliseum, and USC won 35-3 with Mark Sanchez as the quarterback, and they had just an amazing team, Cushing and Malaluga, and just so many great players. And nobody really regarded that win as much as anything when Ohio State won that game. And then, of course, you come to this season, and because the playoff is moved out of Pasadena this year, it's somewhere else. It'll be in the Rose Bowl, Ohio State versus Washington, the Pac-12 champion. At least they made the playoff a couple years ago, so they have a little bit of credibility. Their coach, Chris Peterson, number 2 on the active winning percentage coaching list, right behind Urban Meyer. So the 2 winningest active coaches will be on opposite sidelines. And, of course, Jake Browning for Washington, making, I want to say, his 53rd straight and final start for Washington. So there is some cachet there. I guess the trade-off this year is the venue is better perhaps than it was last year, although it was a great setting down in Dallas for that game. You had fans from both teams there. This one will probably be, again, sold out at the Rose Bowl, but not much excitement for this game, to be quite honest with you.
And you've talked to the players since the aftermath of the college football playoff selection and knowing that they're going to the Rose Bowl. And again, the Rose Bowl for guys like Steve and I growing up in the Midwest way back when on those dark and dreary New Year's days, and to see that bright field on the TV screen with the San Gabriels in the background and one of the more picturesque settings in college football, the beautiful field, and the 2 teams, the one from the Midwest and the Pac-12 champion, going out there and playing, just kind of lit up the living room again on what was typically a dark and dreary once it hits 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon East Coast time in the Midwest. But so it's just difficult for me to process not getting excited for the Rose Bowl, but that's the playoff for you. So I'm guessing that the players generally gave a good face in regards to this matchup with Washington and getting the opportunity to play in Pasadena. But were there a few glimpses of disappointment?
Yeah, I think some of that has subsided now that it's been 10 days, I guess, since the Big Ten championship game and since the pairings, I guess, for the playoff came out. Ohio State regarded as number 6 in the final poll by the playoff committee, behind even Georgia, which lost 2 games and didn't win a conference championship. So, maybe some of that serves as a chip on Ohio State's shoulder to say, let's go prove to the world that we deserve to be in a playoff. I think they also have the incentive that this is Urban Meyer's last game, and they want to send their coach out on a high note and give him a victory as he rides off and closes this chapter of his coaching career, if not his coaching career in total, with this game. So I think that that's kind of an interesting subplot for this game too. I mean, it is interesting. We get to talk to Urban Meyer the day that the pairings were announced, before he made his announcement that he was going to be stepping aside. And I had to flag down the moderator, the sports information director, Jerry Emig, and he's the one who calls on the people to ask the questions. I said, "Can I ask just one question?" And he's like, "Yeah." I waved to him. I said, "Nobody's asked about Washington." And so he let me ask one question about Washington. Meyer gave about a 20 to 30-second answer. And sure, it was the day that the pairing was announced. But, from Friday night of that weekend, you knew that if you didn't make the playoff and you won the Big Ten championship game, you're going to be playing Washington in the Rose Bowl. And it's still an afterthought. I don't think anybody's really that excited about it. And I'm not meaning to give anybody anywhere bulletin board material. I'm just telling you that Ohio State had much bigger sights for this season. They won the Big Ten championship, went 12-1, and it wasn't good enough. Obviously, the one loss was, as it turned out, kind of a disqualifier for them to lose by 29 points at Purdue, a 6-16 this season. This is all material that we've covered backward and forward, I know, prior to this, but again, you're hard-pressed to find anybody who is really that excited about Washington here on the 12th of December. But my guess is by January the 1st, and they see the setting, as you mentioned, at the Rose Bowl, the best non-playoff bowl game every year. And certainly, the years it's in the playoff, still just an amazing setting out there. I think it's going to be something to look forward to, definitely.
So if motivation is a factor in this one, it certainly could have been the same situation last year. And you laid out the scenario with the Buckeyes winning the Big Ten championship, getting left out of the playoffs as the number 5 team with 2 losses last year, and still turning in, even though it was a sloppy game, as you mentioned, ugly offensive game. Ohio State, the much better team on the field. The pass rush was dominant in winning 24-7. So whatever Urban Meyer magic exists throughout his coaching career, and not just the stop in Columbus, but elsewhere, that gets his teams ready for rivalry games and postseason games. Despite questions about motivation last year, you would have to think for a final game for him would be in play for the Buckeyes to kind of hurdle that disappointment.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Just 2 postseason losses when you take in just the bowl games for Meyer at Ohio State. Both of those were to Clemson, one in the Orange Bowl and one in the Fiesta Bowl, I believe, for the national semifinals 2 years ago. So otherwise, it's been a clean sweep for Ohio State with Urban Meyer as the coach in these bowl games. And his record, when he has more than a week to prepare for a game, is something amazing. As you mentioned, his record in rivalry games was amazing. And I guess we'll put it all to the test one more time this upcoming game, January the 1st, against Washington in the Rose Bowl. We'll see if he's able to summon that one more time and put the Buckeyes in position to come away. It would be a second consecutive bowl win, as we mentioned, after USC last year. The record, I think, would be then 4-2 or 5-2 in bowl games under Urban Meyer. You count the one season as 2 with Alabama and Oregon postseason games. So, it's a very interesting discussion, to say the least.
We've got Steve Hellwagon on the line from 247 Sports. The Ohio State platform there is Bucknuts. Steve, we see the announcement today from Draymond Jones that he will not return for his senior season, and he's moving on to the NFL draft.
Yeah, this was something I think that a lot of people knew about and had been discussed, if not publicly, at least privately, for quite some time. When the announcement was made it would be the Rose Bowl, they had Draymond Jones come in and speak to the media, and they asked him if he planned on playing in the game. And as of that date, he said he wasn't sure. Today, he said, yes, I'm sure I'm playing in the game, but I'm also sure that it'll be my last game at Ohio State. He'll be moving on, entering the NFL draft. I think some people believe he could be a late first-round pick. He's been there 4 years now. should have his degree wrapped up, if not the end of this semester, pretty quickly. So a lot of positive things for him. He had really a good year. The only first-team All-Big Ten player on Ohio State's defense this year was Draymond Jones. Played kind of an undersized, athletic defensive tackle, 280 pounds, will probably be a defensive end, outside linebacker, depending on the scheme that he gets into at the NFL level, perhaps more as an edge rusher. And when he was on this year, he could dominate games, that's for sure. And he had, I think, obviously it hurt Ohio State to lose Nick Bosa. Teams that were double teaming Nick Bosa early in the season then moved and were double teaming either Draymond Jones or Chase Young as the season wore on. And so he had a little bit more attention, a little bit more interference between him and the opposing quarterback, but he still made a ton of great plays throughout the course of the year and did more than his share, obviously, to help the Buckeyes pull off the Big Ten championship and a 12-1 regular season.
We're breaking down the Buckeyes with Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports Bucknuts. We talk about Draymond Jones moving on to the NFL, moving on to the next level. We'll talk about some guys that are moving on to campus from the high school ranks to the next level. And, of course, we're just 1 week away from National Signing Day, the early signing day, which took hold as the signing day in 2017. Your thoughts about the class that ranks number one in the Big Ten?
Yeah, this is not a vintage Ohio State recruiting class. During much of Urban Meyer's time, they've been a top five team in terms of recruiting. I think with all of the upheaval that you had surrounding the program, it really hurt recruiting for Ohio State. The uncertainty basically from mid-July on, Urban Meyer being suspended, then coming back and coaching the balance of the regular season, his health issues, all of that kind of contributed to hurt Ohio State's recruiting, in my opinion. They probably lost a few guys that maybe in another year they would have locked up. Still, it's a 16-man class as of today. Probably be 20 to 22, I would think, by the time everything is done in February. They could add a few more, a handful of guys between now and the February signing day. But as of right now, they've got 16 guys lined up. As you said, it's the number one class in the Big Ten, number 9 in the national rankings. So it could be another top 10 class as they pass the baton from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day. I guess you could say this is Urban Meyer's last class, or you could say it's Ryan Day's first class, however you want to put it. He's going to be the guy that coaches them. And obviously for them to retain these guys, they all now obviously know that he will be their head coach going forward when they sign. I think it's a week from today, next Wednesday, the 19th. You look at it, they have got, according to our list of 24/7 Sports, at least 4 guys who are national top 100 players. When you're talking about the wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, offensive lineman Harry Miller from Buford, Georgia. You're talking about Jordan Battle, a safety from St. Thomas Aquinas, and Doug Nestor, an offensive lineman from Huntington, West Virginia, Spring Valley High School. Those 4 guys in particular are national top 100 players. Battle it's kind of up in the air whether he's going to sign or not. May keep his right open to sign in February because of the coaching change, being very honest. Maybe want to keep his options open and maybe take an official visit or 2 somewhere else. Nestor was originally going to enroll in time for the start of the winter semester. That may be on hold now as well, as he kind of weighs through things as well. Just outside the top 100, they do have an outstanding prospect from Lexington, Ohio, which is basically somewhere in between Columbus and Cleveland. If you could picture that, a linebacker, Cade Stover, Ohio's Mr. Football Award winner, an outstanding offensive and defensive player this year. Cade Stover is also just outside the top 100. So they've got some star power here. They'd like to add more to it, certainly. And I know that Ryan Day and the coaching staff have been out there, beating the bushes, basically. We showed up to interview players today. They had a light practice session today in helmets, T-shirts, and shorts. They're just wrapping up fall semester exams today and tomorrow, so they'll get back to hitting probably over the weekend. But Larry Johnson, the outstanding defensive line coach, who is one of their top recruiters, he was walking into the building the same time I was, presumably coming in off the road. So that'll tell you the efforts that are being put in for Ohio State to wrap up at least the early signing period for the 2019 class and try and get the best players they can get in this 2019 class.
Cade Stover, you mentioned him from Lexington High School, Lexington, Ohio, the Lexington Minutemen, if I remember correctly from my days of calling high school football and basketball there in North Central Ohio. Let's see, 4 Buckeyes staying in the Buckeye State to play for Ohio State, 2 from Florida, 2 from Georgia, everybody else spread out amongst the Midwest and the South. Any storyline here in regards to, and I know this was brought to Urban Meyer's attention again in regards to keeping the best players in the state of Ohio and some of the challenges that he thinks are in play there.
Yeah, you make a good point. This will be the second year in a row where there are not a lot of Ohio prospects. And my guess with Ryan Day, that's something that they're going to go back and really evaluate and look at and see, are there difference maker type players from the state of Ohio that we are not getting? You look at Kentucky, they had an outstanding season this year, and they're playing a lot of Ohio guys that perhaps in previous years would have ended up at Ohio State, but instead ended up going to Kentucky. Purdue is getting some outstanding guys out of Ohio as well. That's been a part of their big turnaround as well. Michigan State are always active. So is Penn State, Notre Dame. Couple interesting stories, I think, of the guys that they are getting. One of the Ohio players is Tommy Eichenberg. His brother is on the squad at Notre Dame. I believe he's an offensive lineman for them. Tommy Eichenberg, he was committed to Boston College not long ago, but Ohio State went back in there and offered him a scholarship here near the end of the season, and he was able to accept that and will now be a part of Ohio State's class. So that's good, obviously, to flip him. Another guy in this class that's a really interesting story, his name is Cormonte Hamilton. He is from Tennessee. He is a tight end from Memphis, Tennessee, Whitehaven High School. And how bad did he want to be at Ohio State? This is not a guy who is necessarily a top-ranked prospect. In fact, in his position group, he's only the number 29 tight end, 6'2", 263 pounds. I'm going to call him a tight end, but my guess is they'll get him in and figure out what position, whether offense or defense, will be the best place for him. But he wanted to be an Ohio State Buckeye so bad, he took a Greyhound bus from Memphis, Tennessee, up to Columbus to attend a summer camp to impress the tight ends coach, the offensive coordinator, Kevin Wilson, and Urban Meyer, and earn a scholarship, and committed almost immediately when he was given a scholarship spot. So there's a guy there who checks some boxes in terms of intangibles and can do and will do. And that's a guy you can win a championship with if you get him into your program and develop him. So that's kind of a neat story, I think, for him. Ohio State has continued to make some hay in the state of Indiana. Craig Young is an outstanding athlete prospect from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Wayne High School. So he'll be part of this class as well. They've got another outstanding wide receiver, David Bell, from the state of Indiana, that Ohio State may be working on as well to try and get either with this signing period or later on. He's just on the cusp of national top 100. You look at, Austin Mack is from Fort Wayne. Terry McLaurin on this team currently, an outgoing senior, is from Indianapolis. So the Buckeyes have gone into Indiana and stolen some key prospects here in recent years, and got one, I think, obviously with Young and potentially with Bell as well, depending on how they do with him. You just look up and down this list, and I mean, it's impressive the way with Urban Meyer, you go into New Jersey, you go into Missouri, you go into Georgia, and you just go in there and act like you're at home, basically, back in Texas with Garrett Wilson. He and Brian Hartline, the newly minted wide receivers coach, have a rapport, and he's going to play for Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, a national top 50 prospect, Garrett Wilson from Lake Travis in Austin, Texas, right there in the backyard of the University of Texas. So even though this has been kind of an up and down recruiting cycle, it's obviously going to work out, I think, for Ohio State in the end. And they've already got a few top prospects lined up for 2020 as well.
All right. Tremendous rundown of the Ohio State 2019 recruiting class. As Steve mentioned, 16 in the fold if they keep their commitments, and it'll probably be a class of about 22. So the early signing day is taken hold as the signing day. We didn't know necessarily what to expect, but 2017 showed us that about 80% of the total signees for most of the Power 5 teams would sign on the dotted line on that early signing day, which is December 19th, this time around here in 2018. All right, Steve, we appreciate you stopping by. Hopefully we can have you back a number of times before the Rose Bowl.
Definitely. We'll keep our head down and see what we can find out about Ohio State versus Washington. I want to do some deep film study on Washington. I got a couple of their games on DVR and really want to watch and see what they're all about. I know that earlier in the year, they lost to Auburn, lost to Cal, lost to Oregon, but very impressed the way that they finished the season with Washington State and Utah. And I think once Ohio State sits down and watches Washington on tape, they're going to be just as impressed and know that they'll have to go out and play their best game if they expect to beat them.
Okay, we'll end it with that.